What is the biblical authority for Sunday worship? In my last video, I shared some of the 171 Bible verses that mention the words seventh day or Sabbath. It was clear that the seventh day was blessed by God and kept by Jews and later Christians as well. In fact, Jesus kept the Sabbath and said he was Lord of the Sabbath. Paul, Barnabas, and others kept the Sabbath. Paul taught both Jews and Gentiles alike about Jesus at synagogues on the Sabbath. When we see most Christian churches today observing Sunday, or the first day of the week, as holy, we expect to find authority from the Bible. What do the Holy Scriptures say? Matthew 28:1, Mark 16:2, Mark 16:9, Luke 24:1, and John 20:1 all are related to the day that Jesus was resurrected from the tomb. John 20:19, Jesus appeared to his disciples on the evening of his resurrection, the first day of the week. Acts 27, and upon the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul preached unto them, ready to depart on the morrow, and continued his speech until midnight. Note, if you look up the word break, you'll find the Greek equivalent to be glassian. That's the same word used in Mark 8:6, when Jesus breaks bread and fish and has them distributed to the hungry crowd. Therefore, it could have been a meal. Some argue that they had communion. Since the first communion was in the upper room on Passover, there wasn't a Bible precedent for having communion on any certain day of the week. 1 Corinthians 16, 1 through 2. Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I have given order to the churches of Galatia, even so do ye. Upon the first day of the week, let every one of you lay by him in store, as God hath prospered him, that there be no gatherings when I come. Note, it is clear this verse is referring to collecting. In the above passage, lay by him in store is translated from the Greek word thesouzier, someone who stores up treasure for himself. So each person was to set aside a portion of their treasure or goods from their stockpiles to give to other churches. Paul is giving them advance notice so that the collections will be ready when he arrives. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day and heard behind me a great voice as of a trumpet, Revelation 1:10. Now here, John is referring to when he had his vision. There is no other reference to the Lord's Day in the Bible. We could speculate it was the first day of the week, Sunday, but even if it was, there's no mention that this was a holy day or a day of worship. That's it. There are no other Bible texts which mention the first day of the week. Nowhere does the Bible provide evidence of a new Sabbath day or a day of worship. There is a lot of speculation who initiated movement of the day of worship from the seventh day of the week, Sabbath, to the first day of the week, Sunday. Of course, pagan practices of sun worship and the incorporation of pagan doctrines into the early Christian church have been a point of interest. Pope Sylvester I, the Roman Emperor Constantine, and Eusebius, the Bishop of Caesarea, all have been mentioned of using their influence and power to gradually change the day of worship to Sunday. Perhaps the Catechism of the Catholic Church will shed light on the subject. If the Bible does not authorize the changing the seventh-day Sabbath nor establish the first day of the week, Sunday, as a new holy day of worship, what does? And here's an excerpt from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Under the day of the resurrection, the new creation. And it basically says that Jesus rose on the first day of the week. So they're saying here for Christians, it has become the first of all days, the first of all feasts, the Lord's Day. So I'd encourage you to take a moment and pause to read through this and see where the Catechism uses the words of men to describe why they worship when they do. We have another excerpt from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Sunday is expressly distinguished from the Sabbath, which it follows chronologically every week. For Christians, its ceremonial observance replaces that of the Sabbath. So they're saying here that Sunday is a ceremonial keeping or observance of the Sabbath, not replacing it, not having the same value as keeping the biblical Sabbath given by God. Sunday fulfills the spiritual truth of the Jewish Sabbath that announces man's eternal rest in God. For worship under the law prepared for the mystery of Christ, and this was done, there prefigured some aspects of Christ. Those who live according to the old order of things have come to a new hope, no longer keeping the Sabbath, but the Lord's Day, in which our life is blessed by him and by his death. 2176. The celebration of Sunday observes the moral commandment inscribed in nature in the human heart to render to God an outward, visible, public, and regular worship as a sign of his universal benefits to all. Sunday worship fulfills the moral command of the Old Covenant, taking up its rhythm and spirit in the weekly celebration of the Creator and Redeemer of his people. So they're saying here again the words of man that, well, we're not going to keep the Sabbath anymore, but ceremonial-wise we will, and we'll just do it on Sunday. We've replaced what God gave in Genesis, a holy day, and blessed it, and say, well, we're not going to keep that, but ceremonially let's move it to Sunday. So the Sabbath was given by God. Sunday worship came from man. Who will you follow? God bless and thank you.